please state your name followed by the pound sign.
Now joining, name not recorded. Now joining,
Chelsea Rhodes.
now joining,
Heather Grain.
now joining,
Maria Villacampa, Centro Campesino Farm Worker Center.
Lori.
Hi, everyone. We're going to get started in just a moment.
now joining,
Denise.
now joining,
Diana Rubin.
now joining,
Tony Red.
Well, good afternoon, everyone.
now
Welcome
joining,
to the 2014-15 AmeriCorps contract webinar. It's about 2 o'clock, so we're going to get started. This is going to be recorded and posted and available on our website. So I am Kat Keene. My role at Volunteer Florida is as the National Service Programs Director. And joining me is Janice Timmons, who's our Director of Finance at Volunteer Florida.
now joining,
We are kind of your finance program team.
now joining,
and we're going to lead you through
now joining,
ICC today. One of the things I want to share as we get started, it's pretty important that you have these contract documents in front of you that were sent via email. You'll get more out of this webinar
now joining,
if these documents are in front of you. And again, you could refer to this webinar later. We are so excited
now
for
joining,
the next contract year. A couple tips as we move forward in the webinar.
now joining,
line.
name not recorded.
Please mute your line so we don't hear the background in your office, and you can ask your questions throughout the webinar. We will pause and address your questions as needed. We will be ending by
now
3 o'clock
joining,
today, so any pending questions you can send to us. Also, if you have questions,
now
you can
joining,
type them in the chat box as well.
Maurice Vanville.
So we're going to go ahead and get started with the overview
now
of
joining,
our contract, our Volunteer Florida AmeriCorps.
name not recorded.
And this standard contract that you received is in draft form, so I want to let you know that first and foremost, it is in draft form. And along with that contract comes a total of 12 exhibits. It's that kind of year. It's going to be great. So for those of you that have been AmeriCorps grantees before, there's a couple changes, though not significant. For those of you that are new to AmeriCorps, you will be receiving a lot of one-on-one technical assistance with our team. So if you have questions today, don't worry. We will get your answers for you. So first, I want to move into the standard contract. Our standard contract with Volunteer Florida has 3 specific sections: the provider agreements, the commission agreements, and the provider commission mutual agreements. This standard contract is very important because it really guides your year. If you are a program person on the phone, make sure your finance team knows this contract. If you're a finance person on the phone, make sure your program
Now joining. Name not recorded.
knows this contract. It really guides much of your year, as any contract does. You will receive all of this contract package for your program as soon as CNCS provides the final approval of the AmeriCorps formula package. So that is why you haven't received it yet, because CNCS's approval is pending.
Now joining.
To get you started in the year. So that's why you have these draft documents now, and we're doing the webinar now, because many of you will have an August 1st start date. So moving through the provider agreement, the first section, 1, provider agreement, really moves through compliance primarily. It has references to the exhibits, which we will talk about in a moment. It gives you further detail on the budget and budget
now joining.
process.
Connie Hoke.
And the property as well. One of the things that it does mention is adherence to AmeriCorps provisions and associated regulations. These are federal dollars, and there are a number of regulations associated with it. The AmeriCorps provisions is a separate attachment. It's a separate exhibit, and we'll get to that in a moment. But that is very important. It also moves through some other requirements, like the Administration of Members with Disabilities Survey and program reporting. You'll see there under H, Planning and Program Reporting, really laid out some of the expectations about reporting through the year. And when you get to I, there's some key trainings that are also required within 45 days of your start. These are online trainings. They're very easy to complete, but we found that they're pretty essential in onboarding you with some key information as you start the year. Also, there's some discussion about reimbursement and the reimbursement process at Volunteer Florida, and audits, final financial report.
Now joining.
Carolyn Lynn.
And then moving into partnership development and site agreements. You will be entering many site agreements with the service site where AmeriCorps members are serving. So these are all important to refer to. There's a section on disaster preparedness, response, recovery, or mitigation. This really refers to if a disaster occurs and FEMA is involved. There's some really specific information in that. And this is particularly because AmeriCorps is a solution nationwide to disaster response. It doesn't necessarily mean your members will be pulled away to respond to disaster, but it does speak to the opportunity to serve in a time of disaster. We also talk about the evaluation and the quality of assurance activities and records and documentation and insurance. So please do pay attention to this. One thing that you'll see us focus on a bit in the near future is section
Now joining.
Where we will really be working with you to publicize your story and tell your story and provide you some additional media guidance on there. And I think I'm going to stop. I've covered provider agreements and commission agreements. But I think most of you may have some questions about the mutual agreement section, section 3, which includes some numbers in the sample contract that you received. And we want to make sure to explain to you what these numbers mean, because you'll see some similar numbers in your contract when you get it. And these have a lot to do with how you move through your year. So I'm going to pause there. Just remind everybody to please mute your lines so we don't hear that background noise. And let Janice go ahead and talk a little bit about the provider and commission mutual agreement.
Thanks, Kat. The provider and commission mutual agreements is the core of your contract as far as dollar amounts go. When you look at section 3B, which discusses your contract, you're going to see 4 numbers, A, B, C, and D. The first number or first letter A is your total contract amount. That is going to be your CNCS share and your grantee share combined. So when you're looking at your budget in the E-grants, it's going to be that total number at the very, very bottom. The total CNCS share is the amount we are going to reimburse to you based on your invoices that are provided on a monthly basis. The total CNCS share for VF support is going to be something that we provide to you as a support cost. What this dollar amount will actually come to Volunteer Florida. It will support the program director trainings. It will support a spring training that we plan on having. It will also support several other functions as far as getting us to your sites to do one-on-one site technical visits. And this is due to unexpended funds from last year. Unexpended funds were a little bit higher than what we expected. So we felt one of the best ways to utilize these funds was to actually get on site a little bit more this year and also provide a break to you for the travel that you're going to have to incur to get to our PD meetings. So one of the things we're looking at is with this dollar amount, we're actually going to pay your expenses for the program director trainings. So those costs are no longer shared. We will pick up that entire cost. So that's one of the ways we're trying to support you this year. So that gives you a little bit of background on C. And then D is the total grantee share that you will be providing as your in-kind or match. If you go into C, it also discusses our $1,000 for the Volunteer Florida statewide evaluation, which Kat can talk about a little bit more, and then the Commission's fixed fee for administrative costs, which is 2% this year. Any questions?
Because we're in the middle of this.
Janice, I have a question. This is Lori with Northwest.
Hey, Lori.
Hey, if the extra money that was put into the travel that you're paying for all the meetings and for the site visits, if there's excess money, are we allowed to reallocate that within our budget?
You cannot reallocate that in your budget. That is money that's going to come directly to Volunteer Florida to pay those expenses. So it cannot be reallocated. It is a line item included in your budget under other program operating costs, and it is $8,695.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions about that part? Right. So as a reminder, these are all cost reimbursement contracts for those of you that might be new. And you will see on some of the final pages our contact information. You'll see an identified program manager, which will be your point person primarily for program support, and you'll see Janice and I as contacts too. We'll be asking you to provide contact information of your program director, your designated single staff person that will be supporting these functions. That's that one FTE of a program director, and your fiscal person and your mailing address. So when you execute this contract, there's a couple pieces to fill out in terms of people's contact information. Also attached to this will be those exhibits, and so I'm going to move into the exhibits now. All right, well, the first one, which you don't have in front of you, or you may, is your approved AmeriCorps proposal. This is what you submitted in eGrant. And it's important that you know and be familiar with that final proposal, the one that's in there after clarification occurred, your budget and your budget narrative and your overall proposal, including performance measures. So please be familiar with this content, including some of the service locations that may have changed. It's the foundation for your year. It would be important that staff that are working on this grant be familiar with this contract. Don't leave it at the executive level. Make sure that staff that are engaged in the operations are also aware of what this approved proposal says you are and aren't going to do. If any challenges occur, we ultimately always go back to the approved proposal, so this is key, as well as some of the service sites and service locations. If you are choosing to have members serve outside of the approved service location for any reason, that's unallowable, not in your contract, and it would be something to consult with us on prior. So your approved AmeriCorps proposal, that will be your Exhibit 1 in this contract. Exhibit 2, well, my team would tell you Exhibit 2 is a lot of fun because all of the program managers that work to support you work pretty hard on Exhibit 2, because what Exhibit 2 includes is your performance measures. So this is where we articulate to you what outcomes and outputs you have assigned for the impact of your program. It also talks about your recruitment for staff responsibilities, and that's going to mirror your budget, your responsibilities for member recruitment, staff training, member training, and engaging in national service activities. So I would say, in addition to that proposal, Exhibit 2 is very important that your staff have access to and understand, as they will be the ones primarily responsible for this. So if you're onboarding new program directors to staff this, that AmeriCorps proposal and this Exhibit 2 would be important elements to provide them. One of the things we spend a lot of time on at Volunteer Florida is the National Criminal History Check status. And that is that all members and staff complete this. This is an exhibit that we're going to refer to later, but you'll see it mentioned throughout. It's both a training requirement that you'll need to complete within 30 days. You'll see it articulated here and later. We found that cost repayment usually has to do with incorrect criminal background check processes and procedures. So I would say this is another thing to really have staff pay great attention to. Okay, any question about Exhibit 2? Okay. Well, the last thing I'll add for those that are new is we do have required member trainings. You'll see that on the last page of Exhibit 2. They include Red Cross or comparable CPR and first aid, diversity appreciation, citizenship, disability awareness and appreciation, and introduction to disaster, preparedness, mitigation, and response. One best practice many AmeriCorps programs use is to engage these trainings as part of an overall member orientation in the beginning of the year. That's not a requirement, but it's a good way both to take care of these trainings and orient your members to expectations. All right, approved budget and budget narrative. Janice, what do you want to say about that?
Exhibit 3 will be your budget. That is from eGrants. In prior years, we've included some documentation, but this year we're actually going to print out your approved budget and include that as an attachment as Exhibit 3. So the one thing we ask everyone to do is to know your budget, both on the programmatic and the fiscal side. If the programmatic folks know the budget, then they're not going to be sending the fiscal staff something that's unallowable. And that's just the best way to work hand in hand with each other, so that the program knows where they are financially and that the fiscal staff know where the program staff are. Your allocations that you and invoices you provide to us on a monthly basis are going to be based on this approved budget. And monthly reports are based on the approved budget that's in eGrants. So just very quickly, that's what Exhibit 3 is.
Okay, Exhibit 4, AmeriCorps provisions. This is another very important document to refer to because it encapsulates a lot of the federal requirements and standards related to this federal program. So be familiar with these provisions every year because they change. In particular, there is something called prohibited activities in the world of AmeriCorps. These are things that AmeriCorps members cannot engage in. They're listed on page 8 in the AmeriCorps provisions for this year. These prohibited activities are so important that they would be information that you move over into your member contract. It's information you also mirror in your service site agreements. It's very important that members aren't engaging in any of these prohibited activities. It will ultimately result in program repayment, disallowed hours, and can be very problematic. But the reason I bring this up is it changes. So, for example, last year they added some AmeriCorps provisions related to non-duplication and financial fundraising. And if there were some programs that didn't read that right away, and then they had to put an amendment into their member agreement in order to cover those two additions. So please make sure you're very familiar with the prohibited activities within the AmeriCorps provisions. It's something that your program manager can go over with you on their site visit or via technical assistance on the phone as well. You'll see some language that might not refer to you, and that's okay, but in general, these are sort of those federal rules and regulations that do change year to year. Let me stop there and see if anybody has any questions so far on some of the material we've covered. All right. Well, next is the budget revision request form, which never happens. Nobody ever needs to revise their budget.
Exhibit 5 is, as Kat said, our wonderful budget revision form. It's an Excel spreadsheet, and what we ask is that in the original budget column on the Excel spreadsheet, that is actually your original budget request or your approved budget request in eGrants. When you need to make a change to your budget, what we like to see is this form completed and submitted to us with justifications. You can go up and down, you can move columns around, you can move costs from one section to another, and that can all be completed within this form. All we ask is that you sign it and then submit it, and we will try to turn it around as quickly as possible so you can make those adjustments on your side. However, if we have to change the CNCS amount or the grantee total amount, any changes to the dollar amounts at all at the bottom level will require a contract amendment. So remember, you can move line items around without too much of a problem, but the minute we have to change even by $1 the contract, we have to do a budget amendment. So just take that, or a contract amendment. So just take that into consideration when you're making changes.
I have a question, Janice. Why might somebody need a budget revision?
Let's say at the beginning of the year you were unable to onboard all of your members on the first day of the month. So you've budgeted a total amount for the entire period for all your members. Maybe you weren't able to do that. Maybe you actually started one a little bit later and you've lost a month of time for that individual, which means your overall living allowance is going to be reduced. You can move that into other member costs, which actually is a benefit to you. So you can move it around a little bit. You can move it into other program operating costs. That way, at the end of the year, we don't have unexpended funds. You don't have unexpended funds. You've actually taken those dollars and put them to use within your program.
It's such a great example.
Is that a good example?
Because the majority of your contract is going to be concerning your AmeriCorps members. So if 100% of them are not on board on day one, which could happen, you might be looking at moving some costs around.
Are there any questions? And then the contract amendment form, it would happen if we had a budget revision. So if there was a change in the CNCS amount or
Now joining
would be the main reason that we would do an actual contract amendment. Okay. Exhibit 7 is the Volunteer Florida Monthly Invoice Worksheet, which is also fondly referred to as the PER, which is a Periodic Expense Report. And this is something that's used by many commissions around the nation, so this is something that you would see even if you were working with another state in most instances. This is a monthly invoice, in essence. It has all your different sections that actually align with your eGrants budget and should be fairly easy to fill out. You can add lines to it if you need to. The far right-hand column is calculated for you, so you really shouldn't have to add anything into that column. You're only adding dollar amounts in the CNCS section, which is money that you are requesting reimbursement for to come back to you, and then the grantee share, which is the in-kind match side. Remember that it has to be signed and dated. And the other thing I want to stress is that the first invoice is due 45 days after the contract start date. So if your contract start date is August 1st, your first invoice would be due to Volunteer Florida on September 15th. Along with that first invoice, you must submit Exhibit 8, which we're coming up on, which is the National Criminal History Check Status Form, and the NSOPR's for every individual that is being charged to this grant, whether that's a member or staff, either CNCS or grantee share. We need that background check to prove that we are not going to have any returned funds at the end of the year. So any individuals that are going to be charged with the grant, we need their NSOPR with the first invoice. Any questions on Exhibit 7? Exhibit 8.
Oh, Exhibit 8. We all spend a lot of time on Exhibit 8. This is the National Criminal History Check Status Form. And so in the world of national service, it's required that if members have contact with vulnerable populations, they must complete a 3-part background check. This might be different from what you do, slightly different from what you do with your employees or other volunteers. But this process may be unique to you, but it is absolutely required to be adhered to for use of these federal dollars. So let me ask one question before I get started. And somebody on the phone, I bet, can tell me, what is the one type of background check that has to be completed before any staff or AmeriCorps member can be charged to the grant? Can anyone tell me? Oh, I see it in the chat. Good job, Liz Bush from Teach for America. NSOPW check. Great. Gold star. So this check stands for the National Sexual Offense Predator Registry or website. This is very simple. You will go on to this website and do a name-based check for every staff member and AmeriCorps member. This will take you just moments to do, and the printout will give you a date stamp. This is very important to do as you are onboarding members and staff, and that information will be translated into Exhibit 8. I will say if there are any names that come up that are not the staff or AmeriCorps member that you are doing a search on, it's important to initial and note that those are not individuals with a criminal history. So I'm going to take a look at Exhibit 8 now. What you'll see is that, again, this is supposed to be completed by your first monthly finance report. If you add staff or members throughout the year or onboard them at different times, we'll need to have this updated. That will be important to do so that we have an accurate count. You'll include the name of the person, member or staff, the position title, when they were hired or enrolled. You'll note the FBI fingerprint history. You'll note that that's been completed. The National Sex Offender Public Registry has been completed, and the State of Florida Criminal History Check. Now, we need to see source documentation for the FBI and State of Florida Criminal History Check. That's something our team will be reviewing, but generally that is the 3 parts: federal, FBI, state, Florida, and National Criminal History Check. The one thing I want to add is that if your members are coming from another state and that is their state of residence, that's where they applied to be an AmeriCorps member, you will likely need to do a check in that alternate state as well. So our team is going to work with you on this. But the most important thing is that the sexual offender check is done before any time is charged to the grant, and that the other checks are initiated. One of the checks, that can be state or FBI, have to be completed in order to avoid accompaniment. And I'm not going to get into too much detail with that right now, but just know that this should be a focus, a primary focus of your staff and your team as you're onboarding staff and members. And this probably is one of the things that most results in unallowable costs. So, for example, if we're on site and we're reviewing member files and we notice, well, John Doe started September 1, but his NSOPR check wasn't cleared till September 15th, we have to recapture those costs. So that's an example. And there's really no way around that. That is the federal rule. So any questions about Exhibit 8? Oh, we have another question about that. Okay, great. What if a state isn't available when you do that NSOPR check? This is important too. Sometimes when you do the check, you'll see Massachusetts is not available or Puerto Rico not available. And that just means that something's off a little with the system that day. You need to rerun the check until all of the states and territories are cleared. So that's another important one to make sure that you do. Once you've done it once, this will be no big deal, but it is important to learn the process. Any other questions? Oh, there's a question.
Now joining.
About how early before your programs start can you complete them? You know, you can do the NSOPR on members as you're considering them for the position. And also, if you have a Year 2 member that's continuing and there is no gap of 120 days or greater with that staff or member, there's some allowances there as well. But we do recommend that every contract year, every staff and every member do have that NSOPW run again, because it's so simple, it's so easy, it takes very little time, but it can save a lot of headache in the long run. All right. Any questions with Exhibit 8? All right. Well, let's move on.
Okay. Exhibit 9 is your monthly financial report. This is a one-page document, and this is more for your use. Your program's use than really us. But what you're going to be doing is in a third of the way down the sheet, there is a section that says Federal Volunteer Florida Cash, and it has cash receipts, cash disbursements, and cash on hand. What we're looking for you to do is just complete those lines, and we're trying to match up dollar for dollar to our system. So when we run reports at the end of each month, we know how much you've requested, how much you've received, and we can hopefully match those up to your numbers. And then if we have a discrepancy, we can send you reports, and we can document those on a monthly basis instead of at the end of the year. We ask that you complete this form and sign and date it, and then we will send you additional
joining
and instructions prior to the date that it's first due, which would be with the first invoice, which is September 15th. The next, you want to go ahead?
Sure. Well, our final two exhibits really are related to the end of the year. We want you to know them and have them with you right now in your contract package. But really, the equipment inventory and a closeout checklist that we'll talk about in just a moment, they're really documents for the end of the year that you're doing an inventory of property, $500 or more, and it's part of the closeout process for our year. So that's what you will see with Exhibit 10, which is an Excel sheet. And I think we could go on. And then the program closeout checklist, Exhibit 11. You should definitely review, of course, every attachment thoroughly, but these won't come into play until we're closing out your year. And it basically is your certification that things have been accomplished according to the grant, and that really the contract year is closed and all of the deliverables have been met in terms of that.
And then our last exhibit is something new we put together this year, trying to help expedite and facilitate the contract itself. So we created a checklist just so you know what's due and when it's due. What we're asking for is that all documents that are due on or before 30 days after your execution of your contract. So if we send your contract out and it's executed on August 1st, it's signed by you and by us, then what we're asking for is proof of completion for the 2 trainings that are found within the contract. And those really what we're looking for is just an email from you to say, yes, I've completed it, and this is the date we completed it. And we're just going to add that to your file. The other thing we need within 30 days is the copies of your insurance policies, which would include the liability, fidelity, property, vehicle, and workers' compensation. We also need every program to complete a W-9 this year. Some of our W-9s are quite old, and we just want to make sure we have all the accurate and updated information for your programs. And we're also asking for the same thing on the EFT authorization form so we can make sure that your payments are coming to you or going to the correct account and bank. And then if you have not already provided it, which it was required with your submission, but if for some reason you've had a more recent audit, if you could submit that as well, that would be great.
So this is a tip sheet for that first 30 days in reference to your contract. All right, everyone. Well, what are some questions that we can answer for you about any of these exhibits that we've reviewed today?
Are you going to be able to tell us where we can go to have other staff listen? I noticed the webinar is being recorded, so we could have a site where we could have other staff listen to this webinar. It's really useful.
Yeah, absolutely. On our Volunteer Florida webpage, we have a section called Program Director Resources, which refers to the staff that administer AmeriCorps programs, and we post all of our webinars, our calls, trainings, and training material on that as well. So it will be there, and I will send out a link to that following this call. It will not be posted today, but it will be posted in the very near future, and we'll send you that link. Great question.
Great, thank you.
Hi, Kat. This is Carolyn.
Hi, Carolyn.
Hi, Kat.
Now exiting.
Carolyn Lynn.
Now exiting.
Steve.
I may have missed that question. I think maybe somebody got disconnected. So while you're thinking of your questions, I will just say that at Volunteer Florida, we are so excited to support your grants this year. You know, we are the Governor's Commission on Community Service, AmeriCorps, Emergency Management, and supporting volunteers as a critical solution to community problems is what we do. We have 31 grantees this year, larger than we've had in previous years, including 6 new programs. And we see our role, of course, as your funder, but also your partner, because we know the incredible need in your communities, and we're really delighted that AmeriCorps can address that need. It's a transformative resource, and we're really looking forward to supporting this amazing program this year. So,
hi, Kat. This is Chelsea.
Hi, Chelsea. Go ahead.
I had a question about the property equipment inventory list.
Sure.
So the purchase price of $500, is that like a total contract price when we're talking about software? If we're paying in monthly installments, that's under $500, but our total contract, 12-month commitment obviously would be more than $500. How do you want us to handle that?
Hey, Chelsea, it's Janice.
Hi, Janice.
What I'm really interested in is the value of that software at the end of the contract period. So when we do a closeout, we're looking at the value of things. For example, I buy a laptop today for $700. In a year, it's not going to be worth $700. It might be worth $100 if I'm lucky. So that's kind of what we're looking at as far as an equipment inventory. Software, same thing. If you spend $10,000 for it during the year, well, there could potentially be a value to that at the end of the year. If you spend $1,000 and there's been 3 upgrade versions since you purchased the software, it may not have a lot of value. Does that help?
It does. So it would be the total contract amount that you would want us to list, and then in the notes section we would indicate any sort of depreciation of value. Is that what you're looking for, I guess? Because the condition of software.
Right. The original cost would be the total cost that you paid for that item, whatever it is. And then if it's software, I would put that it's software, that there's been 3 upgrade versions since that, and currently it's not even available for purchase. So there probably isn't a value today, or maybe there is a value.
Okay.
Does that help?
That helps. Thank you so much for clarifying.
Sure.
This is Lori with Northwest. Is
Hi,
it just
Lori.
Hi, how are you?
Good.
Is it just this year's purchases?
Yes, that's all I'm interested in, because every year you're supposed to complete that closeout purchase, that closeout contract list.
Right.
So each year you would be filling out or completing that form and submitting it.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
This is Al. I'm with the Heritage Chapin Food Bank. So when will
now
we know
joining
what programs are?
Carolyn.
When will we know what the other programs are, so if we know if there's any in our area that we can sort of collaborate with or compare notes with?
Great question. You can go on our website right now under National Service Programs, and it will be updated for 14-15 contract year, but there is a listing, a program summary, a contact, and I'll tell you, down in your neck of the woods, there's not a lot of AmeriCorps programs. So you don't have any close neighbors down at the Heritage Chapin Food Bank that I know of. Your closest neighbors are probably going to be in Palm Beach, in St. Lucie County, and Miami. And we can send some email introductions as well. We're a team, and so we often rely on other programs. Program directors rely on other program directors to assist. So that's a great question. Our website will be updated soon, and in the meantime, I can send you that list.
Thank you.
Sure. Now, I think I heard a question from Carolyn, and I think I heard her get back on the phone. Any questions from you, Carolyn? Okay, other questions?
This is Alyssa in Miami. I have a question about health insurance that complies with the new National Health Care Law. I've been hearing a lot of different things about eligibility and related to the size of organizations and how many AmeriCorps members you have. Do you have any update on that?
I think with your specific situation, we'll probably talk offline. Of course, as you know, there's been a lot of changes with the Affordable Care Act and the adherence to that for AmeriCorps programs, and we can talk a little bit about that offline. I don't have any updates for you currently.
Okay, thank you.
Hey, Kat, I'm sorry, I had it in mute. Carolyn, did you answer the other question for me? That was the only question that I had about my CFO.
Oh, Carolyn, I think I missed your question. Can you ask it again?
Oh, okay. It's a very simple question. I just wanted to know if we were going to have an opportunity to bring our new CFO to the training this year, the new program directors training, if there will be an opportunity for him to attend in terms of getting information from the financial end at that training.
Absolutely, great question. So to reiterate Carolyn's question, her question was, we do an AmeriCorps new program directors orientation every year, so we bring together all of the new staff for AmeriCorps programs. Regardless of if you're a new program, there's often new staff. That will occur likely in late October for your calendar planning, and yes, we do anticipate having a fiscal track that would be an opportunity for your fiscal staff members to come. So yes.
Thank you, Kat. Thank you. That was it.
All right, any other questions? All right, everyone, well, look for this webinar next week, likely will be on our website. Thank you so much for your participation today. We look forward to a great AmeriCorps year with you this year. Thank you. Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Thanks.
now exiting.
Chelsea Rose.
Name not recorded.
Lori.
Name not recorded.
Liz Bush.
John Stagliano.
Keith Wells.
Tony Red.
Leon Baxter.
Lori Von Kano, Northwest Florida Environmental Stewards.
Maurice Van Viel.
Denise.
Leland Gab.
CEO. Heather Green.
Diana Rubin.
Elissa Vanover.
Regina Clifton.
Now exiting.
Leon Baxton.